Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tish Mindeman, and I'm the instructional designer here. Dr. Elizabeth Kraatz is our speaker today.
Are we using this camera or this
This
one
right here.
Hi.
We are talking about understanding student motivation. She has it on the board here, but I've also shared the screen. And I gave you guys a link to the PowerPoint if you'd like to have that as well. So I'm going to let Dr. Kraatz introduce herself and her topic.
Awesome, thank you. If I push this, will it go on their screen or do they have to hit the button to follow along? Okay, perfect. So I'm Dr. Elizabeth Kraatz. I was a teacher. I taught 8th grade science and I taught adult education prior to getting my grad degree in educational psychology. I got my PhD from Ohio State, or as they will tell you, the Ohio State University. They're very specific about that. I just love learning. My students, where I had this moment the other day, they were like, "You were a musical theater major?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Weren't you also a wildlife science major?" It's like, "Yeah." Like, "And you did pre-vet?" Yeah, it's fine. But I just love to learn stuff. And that led me to get my PhD from Ohio State. And I really, because of my love of learning, I really care about education and helping students learn the most that they can learn. And you can see there is one of my dogs and one of my cats helping me do some of my PhD work there. That's Pavlov and that one's Schrodinger. So of course they are, right? So before we jump into the theories of motivation, so today we're going to talk about sort of 2.5 of the major theories of motivation. I want to make sure we're all addressing motivation from the same viewpoint. So motivation is simply an inner state that energizes, directs, and sustains behavior. So it's what gets you going and keeps you going in any given direction. And so because of this, anytime that someone engages in behavior, they are motivated. Right? They're motivated to do whatever it is that they're doing. And so I hear a lot of times, kids just aren't motivated these days or whatever. And so my question is, true or false then? Some students just aren't motivated. And you guys can type in the chat. I'm going to ask you guys a lot of questions today. So feel free to type in the chat or you guys can just answer too. All right, false.
False, says Morgan.
Awesome. Thank you, Morgan. So students may not be academically motivated. They may not be motivated to achieve in your classroom at high levels, but all students are motivated. So if there's a kid who's acting the clown in your class, they are motivated to engage in that behavior, even if we wish that maybe they were motivated for more academic things. And so today we're going to talk about why students either are or are not motivated in particular contexts and for particular tasks, and then also types of motivation that students have. So of course, the big question for us as teachers is, I want students to be motivated for my class to do the work that I'm assigning them and learn the stuff. And so we're going to be talking about how we can design our classrooms and our assessments so that students will be more motivated, particularly in productive and healthy ways. So to start us off, we're going to talk about expectancy value theory. And expectancy value theory basically just says that motivation is driven by 2 subconscious assessments. The first is, can I do this? We call that expectancy for success. Am I going to be successful? And then the other side is the value for the task. Do I want to do this? Is this something that I value enough to do? And if either of these is 0, then students will not be motivated. So for instance, I might have high value for being an Olympic figure skater. I would love to be able to do that. However, I have 0 expectancy for success. It's not going to happen for me. I will not be successful if I try to pursue that goal. So my motivation is 0, right? Comparably, I have high expectancy for success in taking up, what's the video game where you shoot people? World of Warcraft, right? Okay, I could take up World of Warcraft as a hobby. I have no value for that. I don't want to. So my motivation for that's going to be 0, right? So we have to have some level of expectancy for success and value for any given task in order to be motivated. So we're going to break that down a little bit. Talking about feeling competent in college, we know, maybe we know. Uh-oh. Maybe I need to unplug it and replug it.
I got you right here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so motivation researchers, at least expectancy value researchers, call this expectancy for success. However, cognitive researchers which overlaps some with motivation research, calls us self-efficacy, which is basically my judgment about whether or not I can engage in a given task or complete a given goal. So this is highly context specific and goal related. So for instance, I might have high self-efficacy for math in general. I feel like I can learn math, I can understand it, but I might have really low self-efficacy for a particular math test if I know that I'm going to be super busy and I don't have time to study, right? So self-efficacy is something that is very context specific. And then if you would go on, please, thank you. So by building students' self-efficacy, making them feel more efficacious, more capable of reaching goals or engaging in tasks, we can increase their expectancy for success and thereby increase their motivation. So self-efficacy is influenced by 5 major factors. The first is prior related success and failure. If I've done well in every math class I've ever taken, I am likely to have high self-efficacy. My emotional state, right? We feel more capable of stuff when we have positive emotions versus when we feel crummy. We feel like we can't do anything. Messages from others. So do others believe in me? Do they think I can be successful? Other success and failure, right? If 5 of my friends took this class and all failed it, that's going to influence my self-efficacy versus if everyone's like, oh, that class is super easy, you'll be fine, right? And then group-related successes and failures. Do I see people like me with similar backgrounds to me, with similar knowledge to mine, being successful in a given context? And that's where representation can get really important. So thinking about some kind of broad ways that we can improve self-efficacy and therefore expectancy for success, we can ensure that one score won't doom students' course grades, right? If they do really, really badly on the first midterm and then there's no way they can recover from that, that's going to impact their motivation moving forward. Providing concrete and specific feedback for improvement, enabling students to improve upon poor performance. So that might be on a next assessment or it might be revising a particular assessment. Building on success experiences, reminding them how much they've grown and how much they've learned. Showing many different examples of success, so how success can look different, even in the same context. Showing students that you believe in them, maybe telling them, but mostly showing them. And then working to build positive relationships in the classroom, because if I feel like as a student, my professor cares about me as a person and cares about my learning and my success, then I'm going to feel more capable of doing well in their classroom. So before I ask you guys to kind of brainstorm how this applies to your class, I want to talk a little bit, this is our half a theory. So attribution theory is a full theory of motivation in and of itself, but we're just going to talk about a little piece of it. And so attributions are basically just the reason that we ascribe to something. And in this context, that's why did I succeed or fail? And so my question for you guys then is, why would attributions, why would my assessment of why I either did well or did not do well be related to whether or not I feel capable of being successful? Yeah.
But if I feel like I have control of that attribute, then I can change it now. If I feel like I have no control over that attribute.
Yes, so that's a major one, and that's actually called controllability, and that's one of the major ways that we can classify attributions. Can I control it, or is it out of my control? Also, is it something that can change, or is it something that's inherent to me? Right? If we think, oh, I'm just dumb at math, right? If you just think that you're dumb at math, then you're not going to be motivated to work in math because you don't feel like that's something that you can change.
Stereotype threat.
Yeah, stereotype threat's a good one, right? Are people like me expected to do well or worse than other people, right? And that can affect kind of our cognitive load and how we engage in certain tasks. So thinking through why students failed, or why they think that they failed. So when I was just brainstorming kind of what I hear from my students, it might be that the test was unfair, right? Your test was too hard, your study guide didn't line up, right? Sometimes that might be legitimate, sometimes it might not. But if that's what they think, that's what's going to influence their motivation, right? My professor grades too hard. I've heard that one a lot of times. I say I'm kind of mean. I didn't have time to study, right? This one is much more controllable than the first two, right? I control when and how much I study. I studied the wrong key details. I really thought they were going to focus on this, but they focused on something else, right? That might be something that you can influence in the future. Time management. And then the next one is planning, right? Those two kind of go together. If you think a paper is going to take you 2 hours and it takes you 5, that's going to influence how you engage. Lack of background knowledge. If you don't know enough to know what you don't know, then you don't know how to seek help. and that's going to influence whether or not you feel capable of moving forward. A lack of effective study strategies. I see this a lot in students who like use flashcards and that's all that they do. And then if you have a type of test where flashcards aren't effective, they just don't know what to do. And for these last four especially, a lot of times students are not metacognitive enough. They're not aware enough of how they are engaging and how they're thinking and learning to recognize these things. And that's where we as teachers can step in and sort of give them examples of what does good planning look like? Or if they're really struggling, sit down and talk to them. Talk me through. Are you studying in your bed? Are you studying with the TV on? Right? How many hours are you doing? Are you trying to study for 7 hours at once? Or are you breaking it up over days, right? And we can talk them through sort of making sure that they're using effective study strategies. And then finally, the last one is that classic, well, I'm just not a math person. I just suck at math, right? And that's something that maybe we can address with them one-on-one if they kind of are in that headspace. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is take a minute to reflect on your particular class context and think about how you can address students' expectancies for success in your classes. And this might be by addressing those 5 major factors that influence self-efficacy, or it might be by helping students have productive and accurate attributions as to why they're either doing well or not doing well. And I would love it if some of you guys on Zoom can put some answers in the chat that we can read out and get some ideas going. Do you guys have any ideas? Yeah.
I don't teach, but I'm a student, and one thing that I thought would be helpful, especially with online classes, are like video introductions or weekly videos from the instructors explaining what to expect for that week. But that I told that to the instructor and she did it. She ended up doing that each week and she had a lot better success with that group of students than she had in the past because people actually understood what she expected and where to go, how to navigate everything, because the attention span of students right now, they don't read very much. And if you're putting long announcements in there, they'll read about half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, making sure that instructions are explicit, and I think videos are a great way to do that for online classes in particular.
So somebody on here, Carrie, said, work to figure out what it is that does motivate them and then try to tie the course information to that.
Ooh, so you are jumping to value, which is what we're going to do next, right? So if you can see the connection between sort of what you care about and the course information that you're learning, that can increase your value. It can also increase your self-efficacy too, if that's something that you already feel confident in, right? If I'm trying something that I've never done, like statistics, and somebody can connect it to something that I already feel confident in doing, that can help with expectancy as well. Thank you.
All I wanted to carry from my old days of teaching high school, which was what you mentioned, making sure that they have success in their first or second assignments or things they're doing. There's plenty of time to have regular weeks, 16 weeks into the semester, or the first 1 or 2 things they do does not have to be the toughest thing in the world. So let them have success right from the very beginning and build from there.
Yeah, building those success experiences. Or even if they get something really wrong, right? Even later in the semester, identifying what they did well. And then so sometimes it's a struggle, right? Like finding something that they did well. But if you can find something that they did well and then build on, okay, so next time I want you to address these things, that can help them feel more confident moving forward.
Also like practice exams or practice quizzes, again, building that success or giving them an example of what they might see later so that they can't use the excuse of, well, I didn't know what to study or I didn't study the key concept.
Right. And so making sure that you're explicit about what they should expect, both in assessments and in grading and all of that.
Mary Donahue says, find small successes in their work and point those out and talk about how to improve the other things. We do this often in our critiques.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you. All right. So the next component that we're talking about is value, right? So it's expectancy value theory. We started with expectancy for success. Now we're moving into value. So value has 3 major forms. The first is utility. Is it useful? For instance, I learned how to change a tire. I don't care about changing tires as part of my life, but it is useful information. So I was motivated to learn it, right? Interest is simply, is it enjoyable? This is comparable to intrinsic motivation, if you've heard that term, right? I do it because I'm interested in it, I care about it, I enjoy learning it. And then finally, importance. Does it matter for me? If I consider myself a good student, then maybe achieving at high levels is important for how I see myself as a person. And the value, so these three components, has to offset the cost of the task. So that might be emotional energy, stress, the time it takes to do the task, the opportunity cost, right? I may not get to spend time with my family and friends because I'm doing this homework, the effort that it takes. And so we basically have our utility value, our interest value, and our importance value minus the cost, and that equals our overall value for a task. So I forgot I can't hit the button.
Oh,
You've been so good at hitting the button when I like
I'm so
hit it on this. So thinking about how we can improve value so we can show students why content is valuable or applicable, which goes back to what was said in the chat, right? Showing them why they should care about it. Helping students see their own progress, right? We as humans love to get better at stuff. And so as students feel like they're overcoming challenges and they're learning things, that's motivating in and of itself. We can express enthusiasm for the content and the learning. We can design activities that are engaging and relevant. And make class as interesting and engaging as we can. Use varied instructional methods. I have a tendency to get stuck in like doing the same thing in every class, right? And so making sure that we're really choosing instructional methods based off of the content and our learning objectives can help us increase the interest in the class. We can include student ideas and opinions in class activities, really asking them, what do you think about this? I had one student, I asked them to write a reflection paper. This was years ago. And I wanted to know, like, how have you seen this in your own educational experience, right? What do you think about it? Does this resonate well with you? And he just summarized the reading. And so he didn't get a very good grade. And he came to my office to talk to me about it. And I kind of explained to him again what I was looking for. He's like, oh, I guess I didn't take that part of the instruction seriously because I don't think I've ever had a teacher care about what I thought before. And I was like, well, that makes me sad, but I care about what you think, but like he didn't even, he read it. He's like, yeah, I didn't think you meant it. I'm like, I did. I really did. So helping students see that their ideas, their thoughts, their opinions matter. And then reducing the cost of engagement, really making sure that if you're asking students to read, you're asking them to read the most critical information, right? And not asking them to read 100 pages a day or something that's going to be more than what's reasonable for their lives. So now I'm going to ask you to do the same thing that you just did for Expectancy for Success. How can you first build students' value for what you're teaching? And then second, how can you reduce the cost of engagement?
So I taught a biology for non-majors, which some of them don't feel is important, especially if they're going to be like, something else. And so I always tried to tie it back to being advocates for their own health. If you don't understand how your body works, then you can't be, you don't know if the doctor is prescribing you the right medicine. And then also I used to use Edpuzzle to reduce the cost. So I didn't require them to read chapters necessarily. Crash Course does a really good job of like summarizing the biological principles, and so they're more engaged if they're watching something.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks.
I use screencasts all over the place and do things like pre-training principles and things, so the students see what they're going to engage in that day, that week, that month, or whatever, and they can pause, rewind.
Oh, cool.
And I'm using design principles within that to make it so it's relatively easy to understand and taking part of that cognitive load out. But not everybody does screencast or has quick,
Yeah.
That's my way of trying to reduce the cost. So that they don't go on.
Mm-hmm.
I think setting up the assignments so that the student has the opportunity to choose how they want to do the assignments. Like if you're doing a specific principle, set it up so that the student can decide what their topic will be so that they can apply it to what their interests are.
Yeah. Thanks. Do we have anybody else?
Nobody in the chat right now.
So one thing that I've done in the past few years in teaching is I've really cut down the readings. So in the class that I was kind of took over in my previous job, they just had the students read half a chapter for each class. And so it was like a week a chapter, right? And then each class session was half a chapter. And I really tried to cut that down to less than 15 pages per class session. And then I start class most days by saying, okay, now get out your reading notes and we're going to discuss this. And so I've tried to reduce the cost of doing the reading by making it take less time and only be the most critical information. And I've maybe increased the cost of doing things other than the reading, right? And coming to class without the reading because I expect them to come in and maybe say, okay, sometimes I assign different readings to different groups of students. Say, okay, find somebody who read something different than you and explain your theory and then get their theory explained to them. So they're expected to come in. And I've seen students, almost everybody comes in having done their reading now, whereas it used to be like you had maybe one who would do their reading. And so I've found that really beneficial for getting students to actually come with reading notes so that then we can apply the content in class and I don't have to stand there and tell them all the stuff that they should have learned from their reading. All right, so that was expectancy value theory. So that sort of tells us, will someone be motivated to engage in a particular task or in a particular context given both their expectancy for success and their value for the task? Achievement goal theory talks about types of motivation. So it starts assuming that people are motivated, and then it describes the types of motivation that we can have. So we have two major types of motivation. First is performance, which is related to demonstrating competence, right? I learned the thing, I'm going to show you that I know the thing. And then we have mastery, which is related to building competence. So you can kind of think of it as a showing goal versus a learning goal. And then performance, and to some degree mastery, can be approach oriented, right? I want my teacher to think that I'm really smart. I want my classmates to think I know what I'm talking about. I want to do really good on this test. Versus avoiding looking bad, right? I'm not going to talk in class because everyone's going to think I'm an idiot, right? And we know that avoidance motivation in particular is really maladaptive and can have some negative psychological repercussions. And so we want to really avoid ever stressing this side of it, right? Mastery, on the other hand, is focused on learning and improvement. Would you go on to the next one? Thank you. So I want to make the point too that these are not mutually exclusive. So I can have high performance and high mastery goals. I can be high in one and low in the other, or I can be low on both, right? So if I have both high performance and high mastery, then I care about looking good. Maybe I really want to get an A, but I also care about learning the content. Thank you. When we have high mastery, we know that students with high mastery goals are more likely to hold a growth mindset, which means that they believe that intelligence is something we build throughout our lives as we learn more. They tend to persevere in the face of challenge and even enjoy it. They tend to view effort as necessary for learning, right? I have to work really hard so I can learn and master this topic. They tend to choose challenging tasks. They tend to prefer work that enables them to grow and learn, and they tend to use deep level processing. Students who have a performance orientation, on the other hand, tend to believe intelligence is fixed. So you are born with as much intelligence as you are ever going to have. And if you're just not smart, you're just not, right? They tend to give up in the face of difficulty. They tend to self-handicap. They tend to view effort as evidence of low ability, right? If I have to work really hard, I must not be very good at it. My son is adopted. He's 9 now. And he moved in with us when he was 7. And he told me that his eyes just don't work like normal people's because they can't see words. And I was like, well, you have to learn the letters so that you can learn the words. And he's like, and I was like, you have to work to learn to read. And he's like, other people work to learn to read? Yeah, right? But he was very much in this fixed mindset of like, I can't read right now, so I must not be able to read, right? And so we've been really working with him to develop a growth mindset, right? That we all have to work really hard to learn to read. And then once you do, it gets easier over time, right? Students with performance goals tend to choose easy tasks over challenging ones because they want to look good, right? I can look better if I do something that's easy. They tend to prefer work that allows them to not make mistakes. And they tend to use surface level processing. So hopefully, as teachers, it's clear which one we want our students to have, right? We want our students to learn stuff. So we would like for them to have a mastery mindset. However, a lot of the time, kind of the way that our institutions are set up, really emphasizes performance, right? You have to have a certain GPA in order to keep your scholarship and play sports and all of these things. And I find, at least in my teaching, that a lot of times students lose track of the learning and why they're learning it, and that they should care about learning because they're so focused on getting the grades, right? The performance side of things. And so do students who have performance goals get higher test scores and higher grades? Yes. Yes, they do, right? Because students with purely mastery orientation, right? If they're only mastery oriented, they'll be like, yep, I learned it. I don't need to do this extra homework because I already know it, right? My stance, and this is purely my opinion, is that students are getting performance goals from everywhere else, so they don't need it from us too. They're going to care about their grades because they have to keep their scholarship and they want to play sports, right? And so we can focus on a mastery orientation without worrying that that's going to hurt their performance and their scores in our class. Like I said, that bit is my opinion, but that's sort of how I approach it. So, okay, thanks. So my question then is, in college, where we do have to give grades, right? We know that our students are needing good grades for their scholarships and their athletics and to get into grad school and whatever else it is. How can we really promote a mastery orientation within our classrooms?
Potentially identifying the challenges within the profession that you have to get to this higher level. You keep taking the easier assignments or the easier options. You're not going to be prepared that it's really out there at the professional level because it's different.
Yes. So identifying how they're going to use this information in their future careers. I tell my ed psych students that I don't want the first time they've ever trusted their own judgment to design instruction to be when they step foot into their classrooms. And I would much rather they practice doing that now when they have feedback and support, so that they can build confidence and ability to trust and make good instructional decisions. How else can we focus on mastery? Learning goals, right? Instead of performance goals.
I think building relationships with our students, knowing our students by name and need so that we can show them how they are growing.
And really talking to them about, like, you told me you really care about this. So, you know, I can see you making progress. I can see you're learning.
Would it be the types of assignments, like some that are not as performance-based that would allow them to explore some of the mastery?
So maybe doing ungraded assignments or allowing students to redo and resubmit assignments. All my weekly homeworks, they get credit just for doing it, but I give them feedback on it so that it's only focused on their learning of the content, instead of like, well, you didn't do well enough, so you only got a 5 out of 10 on this one. And I find that, you know, there's always a handful that like take advantage of that and kind of slop something down, but the majority of them really engage with the content and sometimes even put notes on it. Like, I didn't understand this. Can you help me understand this more? And then I know to address it in class.
Providing anonymization of like in a classroom setting so that they don't feel like they have to perform in front of their peers and it's okay to be wrong.
Yeah, making a class culture in which it is okay to be wrong. And like sometimes we learn so much more from being wrong than we do from being right. Right. And so setting up a class culture where like we can all share opinions and being wrong's totally fine, and not something that anybody's going to judge for, can be really beneficial. Or giving students ways to share their ideas without having to talk in front of the whole class. Right. That can also be, sometimes I ask mine to like share with 2 or 3 other people and then have one person share their big ideas. So that way the person who's most comfortable talking in front of the class can be the one to share the ideas from everybody. So that way the ideas are still getting out there.
I've never done it, but like what about self-assigned like 3 class goals? Like have them write what they expect to get out. And then have, and it's not graded, but then have at the end, like, what did you learn from it? You know, like, master from this class. You know, they're working towards those goals. It's not graded.
Yeah. And really I think revisiting those goals too, right? After you've done this big assignment, have you made progress towards your goals? Are you learning more? Are you feeling more confident in this content? And I think really just always keeping the focus on learning, right? And I've had students like apologize because like, oh, my paper, you know, I had to work 3 shifts this week and it's not as good as I wanted it to be. And they're like super apologetic. And I'm like, you know, I care about your learning. My policy, and I've had one student in 5 years take advantage, not take advantage, abuse my policy. My policy is that if you ask me for an extension before the deadline, I will say yes, as long as it is for a reasonable amount of time. So if you email me, you're like, I'm having a really bad week. Can I have 2 extra days? Yes. If they don't talk to me beforehand, then it's points lost for late submission. And like I said, I've only ever had one student try to abuse that. And I find that students turn in higher quality work because they're not trying to rush through it in the middle of a bad week, right? They're giving it the time that it takes for them to really engage and learn from the assessment, which is what I care about, right?
You're reducing the cost.
Trying to reduce the cost, right? And focus on the learning instead of the performance side of things. All right. So some examples of how I go about trying to increase mastery orientation. I think we already talked about some of them. Showing students why the content is valuable and applicable. That one's the same as it was for increasing value. Helping students see their own progress, giving them opportunities to improve, giving explicit feedback for improvement, talking about learning and class objectives. Here's what I want you to get out of this, and here's what I want you to be able to do when you leave class today. Telling students what they will learn or gain from assessments. I try to tell mine why, especially my future teachers, why did I design this assessment this way? How am I seeing it helping them learn and helping them understand the content by engaging with that assessment? Avoid emphasizing grades and scores. Give students time to practice, process, and discuss content. We know that deep level learning takes time. And there can be a desire, like we need to get through this content. We need to get through this content, but really seeing where you can take some time and give them time to process and reflect and think and engage with content can really help them with learning. Working with students as much as possible, whether that's about with deadlines, helping them on their assignments. I bribe mine, I give them extra credit if they bring a draft to my office and talk about it with me so that we can go through kind of the content together. And then also even in class, if you're doing an activity in class, how can you be the more knowledgeable person who engages with them regarding that content to help them learn it? And then finally, helping the students build community and responsibility for each other's learning, right? If we are a community, then it's my job to help you understand it if you don't, right? It's my job to share my reading notes with you and you share yours with me, right? And my opinion is just as important as your opinion because we're all building from our own past experiences as full an understanding of this content as we can, right? The knowledge doesn't all just come from me. It comes from all of us bringing our cumulative experience into the classroom. So what does this look like in your class? So now we've kind of got the self-efficacy, expectancy for success piece, right? We've got the value piece, bringing that in, reducing cost. And then we've got the making sure that we are motivating students in healthy and productive ways, and not in ways that are going to lead them to, say, sacrifice their health or cheat. We know students with performance goals are much more likely to cheat because it's about getting the grade rather than it is about learning the content. So what does this look like in your class? How can you take steps to improve student motivation?
For me, I'm going to throw a lot of social constructivism. I group my students into a lot of small groups. It's online classes. I'll just put them in the flip groups, but I may put them into smaller groups of 4 or 5 students, so they're not making responses to 20 other people. They can feel a little bit more comfortable with each other. And through that constructive group, they build some confidence.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So if you're not familiar with the idea of social constructivism, it's basically that we build our own knowledge through social interaction. So by talking with you about the content, by working with you, by engaging with other people's ideas, we build knowledge socially and also kind of our own understanding of a concept. What else can this look like? Throw it in the chat. Throw it in the chat, please.
I have McGraw-Hill courses. So there's a lot of, I think, that performance-based expectation coming down from McGraw on it. But I teach the business law, so we've only got like this 8-week period, so it's a little short. I found some difficulties. But one of the things that I did with the students on the very first day is that I'm not trying to turn you into attorneys or lawyers. That's not the expectation. It's that I'm exposing you to a resource that you're going to manage and how do you understand that resource. I think that really helped them not feel so much pressure to learn all of this. Like, it's a brand new language for most of them for that semester or for that 8 weeks. And I didn't want to feel like they were, dying in a foreign country. So,
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to try to tell mine, like, you're not going to be psychologists, right? I just want you to be able to think about psychological content, right? How does this explain how you interact with other people and how other people interact with you? How does it explain the social context that we live in? That kind of stuff, right? So taking off that pressure of like, I have to know everything and master this discipline, and more like, how can we grow and apply this discipline to our own future practice?
Where you were talking about mastery, and then also deadlines. If I've seen some professors who they leave their McGraw-Hill quizzes where you can retake them as many times as you want before the deadline. And then if you take it after the deadline, you only get to take it once. So again, you're mastering that content, but also getting it in on time. So teaching them some.
That's a nifty setting to be able to do that. Yeah.
I think utilizing different forms to teach, social media strategy class where like you are actually creating posts and content for social media for a big company with a budget. You have to manage your budget. And I've done things like that before, but if I was brand new to that, it would kind of blow my mind. I mean, you schedule it out for a whole week's time, and it analyzes what kind of feedback your audience will get. And that's not something that I've experienced with any other courses here, but I think that finding different resources for students by instructors, they can really expand the mastery for students who do want to get into marketing. Things like that. So I think that it's great that we're expanding that. I haven't heard of that anywhere else, and I think other courses can utilize different resources like that as well, or even bringing in experts in the field and then having them like write papers about like what they presented. There's nothing better than listening to somebody who's already in the field.
Or even videos I've found of people talking about their experiences in different fields if you can't physically bring them in. There's some really great TED Talks that apply to some of the content I teach where they talk about how it applies, that I think can bring in that kind of piece that you're talking about, right? How does this function in the real world?
Quick plug for the TLPEC. We have lots and lots of resources to include in your classes to help differentiate your learning for your different students.
All right, how are we doing on time?
We're, you said 20 minutes?
All right, so I did not realize that most people would be on Zoom, but hopefully you can still do this even if you're on Zoom. So what I wanted to do, take like 10, 15 minutes to think about if you're planning for next semester, right? What are the things that you can do in your syllabus, in the assignments that you're going to be giving? What can you do to implement some of these things and make changes or adjustments to what you're currently doing? And so I was hoping we'd have 15 to 20 minutes to let everybody kind of think through that, process that, and then hopefully we can share out and kind of see what other people are thinking of changing. Yeah. I think of a good, I think if you're advising or working with students on that side of things, right? How can you help them make sure that they're getting the most out of the classes that they're taking and planning kind of their 4-year plan and how that relates to their careers? Do you know what other student services are on?
Like Chantel's from
the financial aid.
Yes. And then he's from IT.
there's a lot to start on.
Yeah.
And some efficiency.
Okay. Cool. I didn't know that. I'm glad everyone's here. Welcome.
I think presenting them with what expectations there are of just college students in general. A
Mhm.
lot of our students maybe didn't have the best high school career or like the best high school teachers. And so not understanding some of those college 101 kind of things, providing them with that kind of information, I think could help.
And I think even talking to students about their own motivation, right? Why are you here? I always ask this question, and my students are like, what do you, like, you're in college, like, why are you here? And they're like, to get a degree, but why? Why are you doing that? And so I think having those conversations about like what motivates students can be really beneficial, especially from like an advising capacity or something like that. And helping them see that like they need to learn stuff if they're going to benefit from their college education, right? Because at the end of the day, a diploma is a piece of paper. And unless you have the knowledge to back up that diploma, then you're not going to be able to do all the things that you want to do with your life.
Well, and you're also mortgaging yourself in the financial aid portion of it because you are, betting that you will be able to get a job good enough to pay off your student loans by coming here. And so making sure that they have a plan and that they know what they want to do so that they don't have to take extra courses.
I'm just going to give everybody some time to think and process if it's.
Work examples is one of the things, that we give, whether it's going back to screencasts or some other things. I try to demonstrate to my students what I'm looking for at the time so that they know. Side tidbit on that would be like using rubrics, which give I'm looking for this, and this for this point value versus this and this. It does stress a little bit about points, but it also identifies what we're looking for, and that can help give some motivation or self-confidence. So this also goes back to what I mentioned, the retraining principle. You can identify things that are new to the students before they engage with it. It also builds confidence along those lines. That's what we're going on those lines. But that's the stuff that I'm thinking about pre-semester.
One thing I try to do too, and I don't provide these publicly just because they are real student work, but I have some examples of papers that students have written that I've gotten permission from them to remove their name from and share with others. And so, I've said, hey, this is a really great example of what I'm looking for in this assignment. Can I use it? And if they are okay with that, then when I have a student who's like, I just don't know how to get started, or I'm not sure what this should look like, I have something that I can give to them and say like, don't copy this, but this gives you an idea. And then we walk through like why it's an excellent example, right? What are the components that I'm looking for in grading? And even when I talk about grading, I try to focus really hard on learning, right? So this is what I'm evaluating your paper for. And this is why that's what I care about. It was really hard for me because I was, teaching GED classes. And so teaching grammar and language was part of that. And so it was really hard for me to let go of grading for grammar and language in my first few years. But eventually I just was like, that's not my job, right? That's somebody else's job and they can do that. I'm here to evaluate the psychology, right? Do they understand the concepts? And even if they can't write it down effectively, I might tell them, like, hey, put a comma before your introductory clauses. But, I don't take off points for that.
I think also maybe assignment briefs that break it down into individual tasks, like what, if you've got a 13-page paper, here's what this part should look like, and here's when you should have it due by if you're going to be successful, kind of thing.
I have students do rough drafts of their finals as well. And I found that really increases the quality. And I can't do it for every assignment just for the sake of time, but I give them feedback and then we do peer review in class of their final projects so that then they have like 3 people's feedback to incorporate into their final project. It's a big grading load, but I will say grading the finals goes a lot faster if you've already read a draft of it because you kind of know what it says. So like, yes, it adds to the grading load, but the second time around it goes a lot faster.
I'm just going to verify that or double up on that. Since I've been breaking my students into smaller groups, it's almost like working through rough drafts each week. And yes, it is a little extra load at that time, but when the final product comes across the desk, not only is it faster to grade, but you don't have to make the same comments because you were telling them and you were engaging with them a week earlier, 3 weeks earlier.
Mhm.
So that was absolutely, it's a payoff in the long run.
Yeah. And there's such higher quality too, if they've gotten that feedback on it. Any other ideas?
My chat is very quiet.
The difference between typing things out and talking and verbalizing.
Mhm.
One example.
Mhm.
Well, and that's something that you have to assess also, is, are you teaching this class to make sure that they're better writers? Or
Mhm.
will you let them turn in things in different ways so that they can show you their actual mastery?
Mhm.
Because some people are really great writers and really good at BSing their way through a paper. But if you ask them to explain it verbally, it's different. And so allowing students to be able to have that flexibility, I think, also increases motivation.
So we were having a conversation in one of my classes about mental health. It was like our psychological disorders unit, right? So we were talking about different psychological disorders that people have, and mental health and kind of barriers to getting mental health treatment and different, especially with the pandemic, all of the mental health needs have increased, but we don't necessarily have the infrastructure. And so then I asked them, I was like, okay, what do we do about it? You guys have identified all the problems with our current mental health system. So what are we going to do about it? And they kind of looked at me and I was like, if you understand the psychology behind mental health, but you don't stop and think about like how this relates to our society and improving mental health, then what was the point to begin with? Right. And so like you guys are taking over the world, right? They're going to graduate and take these jobs and have the power to influence some of these things. So stopping and thinking now, I'm learning this content, and that's something that I've gotten really good feedback from them on, and that I'm going to try to incorporate more in the beginning of the semester than I did this semester. So that's something I'm changing as far as the first few chapters that we cover, how relevant those are. This semester I started with information processing, which is a little more theoretical. And so I think they didn't quite jump into the nitty gritty and the kind of this matters to me as fast as I wanted them to. So I might change the order of content around a little bit next semester to increase that motivation and that value from the get-go. Maybe anybody in the chat who wants to share?
Negative ghostwriter.
All right. Well, then in that case, that's all that I've got. I do have a 5-question survey that I would really appreciate if everyone would take a few minutes to do. If you are on your own screen, you can just scan that QR code. Or I think, Tish, can you put the email the link out to everybody?
Yes, email the link out to everybody as well.
And that's my contact information, as well as the books that have kind of the basics of the theories. If you want more source information, I'd be happy to share it. But these are two textbooks that are pretty accessible that I really have benefited a lot from. And so I wanted to put the reference information there for you guys as well.
And you guys can unmute if you would like and ask any questions out loud that you would like. Or you can ask them in the chat if you're more that oriented. I would like to say thank you, Dr. Kraatz, for coming and presenting for us. We're hoping to make this a more regular thing where professors can come in and present. And so, or even other professionals, staff and people who want to present about a certain thing that they think can help the campus. So if you're interested, holla at me.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
It's good to have somebody to talk to. If you can't see anybody on Zoom, it's like, who am I talking to?